Second, Kathy.
Second by Kathy. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion by roll call vote.
Director McLaren,
Yes.
Director Ariki,
Yes.
Director Calandri,
Yes.
Director Urosic,
Yes.
and Director Paris.
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. We're on item 7. James, we have your memo in the board packet. A lot of work on that memo, James. Do you want to do a report?
I believe the memo speaks for itself. The committee put a lot of time in to discussion, so I hope those comments will be addressed. And then there are some additional comments by a few of the committee members that are at the end of the memorandum. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to ask.
Okay, great. And as the items come up, if they're not addressed, in some way, you're welcome to come back on and I will check with you at those times, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now we're on action items. Item A is memorandum limitations on small pumper class member new production, and that's going to be Craig.
Yes. On page 27 and 28 is a short memo with respect to small pumper class and new production application. The question was raised in prior meetings whether a new small pumper class member who submits an application for new production above 3 acre-feet, an acre a year, I should say, in essence loses the 3 acre-feet that they are allowed to produce without replacement water assessment. So the question that the memo addressed is whether those small pumpers who apply for new production rights continue to produce up to 3 acre-feet without paying replacement water assessment. For example, if you had a small pumper who presented an application for 10 acre-feet in new production, would they be responsible for replacement water assessment for all of that amount, all 10 acre-feet, or is the first 3 acre-feet not subject to replacement water assessment as a small pumper allocation? And the memo concludes that there isn't anything in the judgment that indicates that small pumper class members lose the right to produce up to 3 acre-feet free from RWA. And our recommendation, and the reason the memo is in is because it was desired to get some input from council on it, and before we consider new production applications on this month's cycle. But our conclusion was that we recommend the small class pumper class members be entitled to continue to produce up to 3 acre-feet without paying replacement water assessment. That's the report on that memo, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Craig.
Craig, could you repeat those last couple sentences? I did not hear them.
Yeah, the conclusion, Director Calandri, is that the Watermaster General Counsel recommends that small pumper SPC members be entitled to continue to produce up to 3 acre-feet without paying RWAs.
Okay, got it.
Okay, any other discussion on the memo? And Craig, is there any action we need to take?
No. It's just a point of information with respect to the board background when this topic comes up again, as it has on regular occasions.
Great.
Craig, this is Adam. The small pumpers also are limited to 25 acre-feet. Is that correct?
That's for qualification for small pumper class. Correct.
Correct. So a small pumper cannot come to the board and request, say, 100 acre-feet of pumping.
They can. There's no limit on their new production amount that they can request. But of course, there'd have to be a material injury analysis, and all we're saying here, Director Ariki, is that the first 3 acre-feet are not subject to RWA.
I understand.
I think you can imagine what the response would be if the request for new production was 100 acre feet.
Correct. So if the request is 100 acre feet, and I understand the memo doesn't address that, and a material injury analysis is done and shows that there is no material injury analysis, and the board approves, the board has the discretion to approve that. And of course, if that's the case, then they are the first 3 acre feet with no assessment. The remaining 97 acre feet is subject to assessment. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion?
I just, this is Derek. I'd like to just comment. Craig, I thought this memo was very helpful, and I just point out to the board as well as the public that I think 2 major takeaways for me was, they're both on page 2, was in the first paragraph, the last sentence where you just you reference the case and what the Watermaster cannot rescind or adjudicated rights. I think that's very helpful, so I appreciate you calling it out. And I think it's important as well as the last paragraph prior to the conclusion, where you walk through the scenario of the Watermaster rescinding and what that action can take and how it can impact. So I think it was, again, Craig, well done, and I know we beat up on you a lot on things, but I appreciate this memo.
Very good. Any other?
Yeah, Rob, one of the things that I'm starting to have problems with is one of the stipulations of approving an application is that the proposed use is reasonable. I guess I took a tour of the east side of the valley and noticed a lot of irregular pumping. I actually noticed what looks to be like a sales, somebody pumping for sales.
Oh. When it gets to 20,
I saw probably 100 totes and trucks being filled, and
do I have
I don't
to
know if that's a reasonable use.
No.
Okay, just stop
a
so 20 minutes.
John,
Yeah,
that
stop
I believe is going to come
and
out
it'll
later in the meeting today.
record again.
All
We
right.
are
20.
to be talking about
Yeah,
action.
20 minutes. I don't
Okay,
need to go
very
over
good.
because
Can I just interject there, because
Okay, got it.
it's prompted by Director Calandri's comments. We have been notified,
short
our
agenda.
staff has
Here's
been
the
notified on occasion
you see,
of
Yeah.
what is considered to be
Got it. I got it.
unlawful
Unless they
pumping
get
or
into
exportation even of water
see,
out of
here's
the
the
basin
adjournment
by
right here.
Yeah,
trucking companies,
they're up
and
here.
we
They're
respond
right here.
with cease and desist
got
letters.
it. I got it.
Yeah.
Staff have dealt with this before and brought it to the attention of council.
I got it, JP.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We're going on to item B, well application, small pumper qualifying documentation replacement well applications. And that's going to be Angel. Angel Show. Go ahead, Angel.
Good morning. We have one small pumper qualifying application on this month's agenda. The application starts on page 33 of your agenda packet. The applicant is Margaret Dolschneider, and the property is located in the southeast sub area. Watermaster staff has reviewed the small pumper qualifying documentation for domestic use at a single family home and a guest house located on the same parcel and determined it is complete. The advisory committee had a couple questions regarding this application. The first question was, is the application considered one small pumper or 2? Per the judgment, any small pumper class member may produce up to and including 3 acre feet of water per year per existing household, allowing each household on this application to pump up to 3 acre feet of water per year. The second question was, how many wells are on this property? This property has 1 well. This application was presented at last month's board meeting and was tabled to allow Craig time to revise the resolution for the approval of the small pumper documentation. Craig has revised the resolution as shown on page 30 of your agenda packet. With this, admin staff recommends approval of the small pumper documentation for
Hey, Angel, this is Adam. Can you remind us what the revision was?
I believe Craig may be able to
Yes,
that.
absolutely, yes. The revision is down on the recitals, number 5. There are findings that were requested by the board for the small pumper qualification, and the language there that says the Watermaster staff has determined ABC, I believe is the new language in the resolution.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank
Okay,
you.
any other questions? Is there a motion to approve resolution number R2109, approving the small pumper qualifying and replacement well applications of the Schneider?
So moved.
Is that John? Motion made by John?
I second.
Second by Adam. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion by roll call vote?
Director McLaren,
Yes.
Director Ariki,
Yes.
Director Calandri,
Yes.
Director Urosic,
Yes.
and Director Paris.
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. We're now on item C, another memo by Craig. Memorandum limitations on new production rights.
Yes. I noticed the way you said another. I'll keep it brief. The board requested, this is an important issue. The board directed me to provide some revisions of the rules and regs and the new production application to address the potential abuses that are occurring with new production applications. The issue, as framed by the directors in previous meetings, is what limitations are there on somebody who regularly overpumps beyond their new production application and then simply pays replacement water assessment as the cost of doing business. And so we developed, along with the Watermaster engineer, who was very helpful and instrumental in some of the language about limitations, some proposed language of limitations on all new production. The idea would be to get comments, and comments came from the advisory committee, and we responded to those and incorporated some of those, and I'll mention that in a moment. But the idea is to get comments from the board and the public, amend the language as necessary, and then post it for public comment at the next board meeting and potential approval. It would amend new and provide for approval of a new section to the rules and regs of 14N, and the language is spelled out on pages 44 and 45 of your packet in the memo. The goal was and was very wisely pointed out by the advisory committee, which is why we amended some of the language after getting their feedback, that it shouldn't be an absolute requirement that the Watermaster take the action that is set forth in that memo, that there can be discretion about whether a new production application needs to be submitted and the person needs to start all over again. So we've incorporated some discretionary language in 14N small IV4 to address that. But I'm interested in comments from the public and from the board with respect to the issue and whether we're on the right track or not. And again, the process is, and the goal is to make it, when I say difficult, I make it that there be serious consequences to exceeding the amount of production in your new production application. and that is set forth in 14N, small double I and small double triple I. And the process is set forth for calculating overproduction and then reducing the next year. You might want to open it up for comments from the engineer who looked at the language and provided some particularly specific language as to the cutbacks that need to occur in subsequent years. But before we open it up to comment, Phyllis, you might want to comment on the language as is stated in 14N triple I.
Yeah, we did have several discussions also involving staff who had good input on all of this as well with respect to how best to handle this. Part of what we were going after really was the reasonableness and the beneficial uses that were being put forth. And so we have that reasonableness language that we've added there to section number 4 IV. And then as Craig pointed out in section III, we simply have the sort of the way to handle calculation of excess production and how best to make sure that they're not pumping more than the allotted amount.
Okay, that's good. Now, one thing, when people apply for new production, do they sign under the penalty of perjury? I think they do. I just want to make sure that that's explicit in the application.
I think that is the language. I don't have the application in front of me. Kate, do you have it in front of you? Do you know if that's on there? I think it is.
I believe so. I just want to confirm that's the case.
I believe it is.
We'll check on that.
Adam, this is from Angels here. She can comment on it.
Thank you.
I don't have it in front of me, Tom.
It says, I understand and agree to be bound by the terms of the Antelope Valley Adjudication Judgment and to pay the applicable replacement water assessments for any new production. Then it also says, I certify that the information provided on this request for new production is correct to the best of my knowledge, and that the signature below, whether original, electronic, or photocopied, is authorized and valid and is affixed to the intent to be enforceable.
Thanks, Patty.
So, Craig, is that good enough?
I think it is. It doesn't say under penalty of perjury, which we could add.
I think we should.
Yeah.
The board,
that addition. That's a good catch.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item D, well application.
Hey, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were moving on.
Yeah.
Rob.
Sorry.
Yeah, I did have some questions on this, and
Please.
yeah. So this is Derek, and I appreciate this. You know, I guess I think about. I know staff's put time into this, engineer and council, and I read this, and boy, it simple mind like myself just feels very complicated. And I think we almost feels like we have to hire an accountant to balance the books on every one of these new production rights. And so my first question back to I guess all of staff is, do we feel this is the most simplistic way to go about this and to protect what we're trying to accomplish? I mean, have we? I just get concerned, reading through this, that it's just overcomplicating a process that may not need to be so complicated.
Yeah, it's a really valid point. There's a fine line between overly bureaucratic regulations and something that the accounting is something that has got to be weighed into by the engineer and staff as to whether this is going to be overly burdensome going forward. But we tried to balance that with the importance of sending a message about new production applications being a tool for excessive pumping that is simply met by the business decision to pay additional RWAs, that there has to be some teeth in it. And I'm all for simpler language and all ears if there wants to be some further editing down of this. It's just we struggled with that tension. I'll just tell Director Yurasek that it's the tension of being overly verbose and complicated with trying to be clear as to what happens if there's over pumping beyond the new production right, and to send a clear message that the board takes very seriously the new production application, and that the material injury analysis is done with that in mind, with a number that's represented as being the number in the application. And when it's exceeded, there needs to be consequences. Though we do talk about allowing a 20% up overproduction up to 5 acre feet a year of excess production without triggering the new production application. So there was some give and take in this process, and we're certainly all ears to hear improvement in the language. The advisory committee's comments were taken to heart about the discretionary nature, and then their questions about whether it's fair to start somebody entirely over who runs afoul a couple years in a row. These are valid questions. It's just balancing that with sending the important message that we want to send, that you can't use the new production application as your entry into excessive pumping over the long term.
Right. And if I may add, just to, because I think Director Clandry at one point brought up this issue of priorities. This year is a very dry year, and we could have multiple dry years. And sometimes, if we don't set policies and send a clear message, then who has the right to groundwater? People that actually have been saving and are careful about how they are using it. So I think that's just a sound approach to dealing with it, at least at this point.
Yeah, I guess my point is not reducing or saying that I don't agree with that, Adam. I guess my point is making sure we have, pressed staff to think through this process, and it sounds like it's gone that way, and be aware that this is going to be a cost burden. I mean, this is a lot of work that now we're putting on staff to manage, and I want the board to be aware of that, the public to be aware of that. How do we count for that, and and who pays for it, as well as I think my biggest concern, and I know John brought this up earlier on another subject, is what is our enforcement and penalties to that, so we have this great document in place that says this is what we're going to do and hold people accountable, but how do we enforce and penalize them to make sure that they're accountable, and that we have teeth to this, as well as a number of things we'll talk about today. So that's all my only, my final comments on this.
No, I share that concern. I do. But you're right. I don't know how we're going to go about recouping our cost if we are to incur costs, and how to enforce a policy that we have in place.
Okay, any further discussion?
If I could just add, this is Matt.
Go ahead, Matt.
So on Director Yurasek's comments, on page 22 of the packet, there's some comments from the advisory committee that kind of point to some input and ideas that the admin staff is going to consider. There's a few good bullets in that memo that we'll consider, and it has to do with prepayment of replacement water assessments for new production and how to better account for things and just overall make the process easier.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. Any further discussion?
One question: does this have to go to the judge, or we can do it? We can make this change.
It needs to go through the amendment process where 30 days posted for public comment and a hearing at the next board meeting, and then a motion to the court, notice to all parties that they have an opportunity to object. It has to go through. We can't just adopt this. This is just the first step.
Got it. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing no further discussion, we'll move on to item D, well applications, new production applications, and new point of extraction applications. And that's going to be Kate.
Good morning. This is Kate. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Great. So there are 3 new production applications on today's agenda.
Can I interject here?
Yes.
Before we leave that, I think there needs to be direction of whether the board is directing us to move in the direction of posting the proposed addition to the rules and regs for a 30-day public comment.
You just that's this, Craig?
Yeah. Yes, I need that direction.
So do you need that in form of a motion or just consensus?
I'd appreciate a motion on it.
So moved, Kathy McLaren.
Motion made by Kathy, second by.
So the motion is to authorize the staff and Craig to proceed with the preparation of the language or the amendment to the rules and regulations?
Yes.
That's correct.
I second that.
Motion made by Kathy, second by Adam. Any discussion on the motion to direct Craig to go forward with the posting and setting the meetings for the new regulations?
I maybe comment, and it may not be right to put it into this motion, but I know, Matt, you spoke up about actions of enforcement. I'd sure like that as part of this, is that staff will, prepare and come back to the board with what, those actions will be for enforcement going forward.
I'll include that in my motion.
Well, I don't, wait a second. Does that need to be included in the motion, Craig, or is that outside of that?
I think that can be side directed to staff.
Yeah.
Straight from the board.
Okay. And Derek, will that be okay?
It's fine. I just want to make sure we have it on record. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. So the motion made by Kathy, seconded by Adam, is directing general counsel to go forward with the new regulations. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion by roll call vote?
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Ariki?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urasic?
Yes.
And Director Paris?
Yes, motion carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Patty will do a good job putting that motion down exactly like we had said it. Now we're on item D, well applications, new production applications, new point of extraction applications. And Kate, you're back on.
All right, great. So there are 3 new production applications on the agenda today. The first one starts on page 53 of the packet. And Mr. Avila is requesting 7.6 acre feet per year of new production for a single family home. And it's going to have a pool and a barn. He'll also have about 6 or 7 horses, it's estimated, and some other livestock, as well as shade trees and fruit trees. And this parcel is in the eastern portion of the Central Antelope subarea, and that is shown on a figure in the packet on page 54. And the information indicates that the new production will be used in a manner consistent with California best water management practices. And given the small amount of production and the obligation to pay a replacement water assessment, we find the potential for material injury as defined in the judgment to be negligible, and we recommend approval of this application. Any questions on this one?
A quick question. This is Adam. So this is a Wallace class or a small pumper class?
This is a Willis class.
Okay, so he's gonna pay for all replacement for the 7.
He's going to pay, correct. And there's no well that was previously existing on his parcel.
And Kate, you and your staff, or you or your staff, went through. It sounds like from the use that you've stated, the pool, the 7 horses, the fruit tree and shade tree and all that. It sounds like this amount is reasonable for that use.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, but you went through the numbers just to make sure that it is.
I do.
Okay. Thanks.
Welcome. Any other questions on this one?
Hearing no other questions, Kate, go ahead. Number 2.
One last question as clarification. This is Adam again. Now, for the Wallace class, the judgment has no restriction to the amount of water an applicant can request, provided this amount is for beneficial use. Is that a correct statement, Kate?
That is correct, and provided that they pay replacement water assessments on all water used.
Yes, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Sorry, Chair.
Right, the next application starts on page 66 of the packet. And Mr. Zanali is requesting 8.5 acre feet per year for a single family home, irrigation of landscaping, and about 430 fruit trees. And his parcel is in the southeast portion of the West Antelope subarea, and that's shown on a figure on page 67 of the packet. And we feel that his water, he indicated, will be used in accordance with California best water management practices. And given the small amount of production and the obligation to pay a replacement water assessment, we find the potential for material injury for this application as defined in the judgment to be negligible, and we also recommend approval of this one.
And again, this is the Wallace class, right?
Yep.
Kate, this is Rob. 430 fruit trees. Sounds like he's putting in an orchard. Do we have any idea what type of trees these are and what the water consumption are of these trees?
There was an estimate on water consumption, and that was done by the engineer who reviewed and stamped the proposal. And I looked at that water use estimate, and it seemed reasonable. Let me look and see if I can't quite remember if he indicated what kind of fruit trees, and I think he just said fruit trees.
Did you guys, Kate, figure out what the usage was for each tree on an annual basis? Trees use a lot of water.
Yeah, what's interesting is that, when trees first go in, they need a lot more water than when they become mature. And so, we were kind of going back and forth, right? In my head, I was going back and forth on, what would be the appropriate water number to use.
And in the paperwork, it says here that approximately up to 430 fruit trees requiring approximately 16 gallons of water per day. From the engineer, Duke Engineering.
Correct. Thank you for finding that. I'm just kind of curious, does that seem reasonable? People who have fruit trees, if anybody's on the line, for what antelope is, the weather conditions and...
Just seems like a lot of fruit trees for that amount of water. And I think we need what type of fruit trees, and
if my calculations are right, that comes over a million gallons a year. well over 1 million gallons a year. And that's assuming that the tree is only using water 6 months out of the year, which is not true. So it could be as much as 2 million gallons a year.
You're talking about the use, John, or the 6.3?
Yeah, that's what just for the trees alone could be I think 2 million gallons a year. But that's pretty rough farmer math, which is not always the best.
That's okay.
That's what I calc out.
Ron, this is Neil Weisenberger.
Yeah, Neil, glad you're on.
You know, what I think agriculturally we always say is about 5 to 5.5 acre feet per acre for watering fruit trees. And so I don't know how many acres these fruit trees are really going to do. But I think we've always used a standard of about 5.5 acre feet per year.
So
And it looks like there's 5 acres.
Yeah, so that kind of calculates to be like 10.
25. 10.
That 8.5 acre feet would be 1 acre, basically the landscaping and the 1 acre feet. The three for the house and 5 for an acre of fruit trees.
Yeah, I just want to tell Director Plandry, his number is very close to the 6.3. I just did the math on a 2 million gallon per year. It comes out to 6.13 acre feet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're very close to what he's asking. He's asking for 6.3.
Neil, it's good to have you on the line. What are your thoughts about 430 fruit trees? It's a 5 acre parcel, but that's going to include the house and other things.
Yeah, to me it seems on the low side, but again, depends on what size of fruit trees they are, whether they're semi-dwarfs or full size, and how many trees per acre. But typically we talk about 5.5 acre feet because they're dormant for part of the year that don't require water. So typically we talk almost 7 acre feet for something growing year round. That's our ET loss in the Antelope Valley.
And do you have any idea how many fruit trees can be put on an acre?
Oh, well, I mean, up in Northern California, they put up to 1,000 trees per acre and treat them really small, but most people are probably between 100 and 200 trees per acre.
Okay, that was real helpful. Okay, any other questions? Need any other information on this?
I've got. Go ahead. I'll be after whoever else spoke up.
No, this is just Kate. I'd like to hear. I really appreciate hearing all this information. It's very helpful.
Well,
John?
I mean, a question that one of my constituents has is why should new production be allowed in excess of what the small pumpers who went through the judgment get? Which I think is an incredibly good question.
Except, I should wait for somebody who knows me better than I do.
Nate, do you want to respond to that, or do you?
Sure, I'll respond to that. Small pumpers can apply for new production, and there's no limit on how much new production small pumpers can apply for, provided there's no material injury and they pay replacement water assessment for all that water that they use. That's new production.
So actually, it becomes an advantage to people who didn't go through the adjudication. They can actually get more water because of the Willis class. I guess the other question is, this thing is Dennis, before he left, had this question many times. Should we be looking towards changing the rules and regs and try to limit what's going to be happening in the future? Because it looks like everybody that's coming in lately is just asking for more and more and more. And I don't know if it's good for us to allow that to just keep happening. We should change the rules or regs, or just go along with the judgment as it stands.
Mm-hmm. I share John's concern. And my question is to Kate, maybe. Kate, do you I mean, I understand you do material injury analysis, but one, that's just a buzzword, the way I see it. I know you do it, but okay, there may not, in other words, someone could drill a well, and if so happen another well next to them, they could actually cause a material injury analysis. But if you're not near an existing well, or you have 4 or 5 miles away, there may not be an impact in the strict term of that definition. But then what are the consequences of replacing this water somewhere else over the long term? There may be other factors that need to be considered, aside from the fact that, as John is saying, accumulatively, where do you draw the line? After all, the safe yield of the basin is only 82,300 acre feet.
Yeah, Adam, that's a really good point. And, we don't really have a model that we can work with. So it's difficult for us to do a credible cumulative analysis study. And so we are looking at it on a local basis. We kind of look and see where other wells are located. We look and see how much they're asking. We look at groundwater contours in that area and depressions and see if we think it will cause a problem. So we're kind of looking at each little thing individually. And as of now, I think it's under 400 acre feet of new production actually has been approved. And that's not counting the 215 that was approved, of new production approved for only use in 2 years. So at this point, there hasn't been, in the big picture, a whole lot of water. But I do think that there could be issues, on a local basis, maybe wells we're not aware of that are pumping nearby a new production well. And so I'm kind of going around and around here, but...
No, I completely get your point, and I realize at this stage, it's not a lot of water yet and all that. But I think, as you all and all the board members are pointing out, and as we all see now in the last 3-4 months, we've been bombarded with all kind of requests. And that's what I'm concerned about, is really, I think we need, this discussion is good that it's happening now, and we need to start thinking of the consequences, whether that means we have to revisit the concept of having a groundwater hydrology model or an update to the existing model or putting a cap on things. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I understand what the judgment says, and I appreciate that, but I'm not sure if that was the spirit, intent of the judgment. I don't think anybody anticipated people coming in and asking, to farm fruit trees or do this and that. And, they're entitled to do that. We just need to be smart about how we make these decisions. That's really the reason for raising the point.
And first, just say the memo that we just discussed on limitations on new production doesn't directly address Director Ariki, your comments about the overall basin health and the material injury analysis, but it is another arrow in the quiver to show there's serious consequences. The material injury analysis that's done, we expect to be the controlling document, and there's going to be consequences if you exceed that on a regular basis.
And I think that's good.
Adam, this is Rob. One thing to keep in mind for everybody is that the state water contractors, including AVAC, Palmdale, and Little Rock, are the ones that will provide the replacement water. And at the levels that we're at right now, I don't think any of these agencies feel this is a problem. At least I think.
Understood. And I don't think there will be. I was mostly concerned
at a point. Yeah, and every time we come up with this subject, we're going through the same things. At some point, if we get into the thousands and thousands of acre feet, and and the state water contractors say, hey, wait, we can't provide this, or we can't get new imported water for this, I think that's a time that we all need to sit down and have this discussion. But, you know, people have property here. They have a right to build homes. They have a right to have fruit trees, and they have rights to have businesses as long as we can provide the water to do that. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind. The adjudication is a good tool to make sure that our basin stays healthy, and all of us are committed to that. But we're also committed to economic growth. We're also committed to people being able to put up homes. And so
and understood. And I don't think anyone is arguing against that. I just think we need to assess the basin in a much in a better way than we're doing it today when we do the material analysis.
I think we keep getting better and better, and we've come a long way in 5 years we've been doing this. And as we see problems, we are focusing on them. But to continually bring up this discussion every time we have the new applications, I mean, if we want to, we can put on the agenda for just a discussion about this. But you know, Craig has covered it pretty well in his memo. I think we're all committed to allowing economic growth in our basin, to allow residential growth in our basin, as long as it's done in a way to protect our basin. So that's my only comment.
Chairman Parrish, this is Flandry.
Sure, John.
I apologize in advance, but I'm going to make a harsh comment. You said these people have a right to pump water and a right to do what they have to do. At one time, I had a right to farm, and because of the adjudication, I am out of business. So this adjudication is far-reaching, and we may have to make some decisions. It put me out of business to protect the basin, and we may have to regulate who gets water in the future to protect the basin. I know that's a harsh comment, but that is the reality that I live, and I would like to call on Mr. Kyle, if he is on the line, to get some of his comments, if you would allow.
Can you hear me?
Galen, is that you?
Yeah, can you hear me, John?
I hate to put you on the spot. Could you please share with us some of your feelings?
It's okay, but there's another path to these people getting water that nobody's talking about. I'm just shocked. There's a private sector out there that's wanting to sell carryover water, production right water, and these people, you know, if you were a small pumper and you went through the adjudication, you got 1.2 acre feet and up to 3 acre feet. And I'm proposing that everybody gets 1.2 acre feet up to 3 acre feet, and then go to the private sector. And if you buy an acre foot, you intervene, buy an acre foot of water, then you can rent or buy more production right. And it's cheaper. This water is cheaper per acre foot than what the replacement water cost is. These people can save, 20, 30, 40% maybe per acre foot of water. Thank you.
Thank you, Galen. I appreciate it. Can we get on to our agenda and move on our production? Any other questions or concerns? Okay, Kate, I think we're on item 3.
All right, so there's one more new production application, and that starts on page 78 of the packet. And Mr. Chambers is requesting 2.5 acre feet per year of new production for 2 single-family homes, and they're on adjacent parcels. And the applicant will be supplying the Watermaster with a shared well agreement if this application is approved. And information in the new production, information in the packet indicates that new production will be used in a manner consistent with California best water management practices. And given the small amount of production and the obligation to pay a replacement water assessment, Todd Groundwater finds the potential for material injury as defined in the judgment to be negligible, and we recommend approval of this application.
Thank you.
What was the amount, Kate?
2.5 feet per year.
Is that for 2 residences? You said
That's for 2 residences.
Okay.
And this is Wells class as well.
Yep, this one there, Willis class.
Okay. Is there motion to approve resolution number R2110, approving the new production and new point of extraction applications for, it appears, the Avila, Zanelli, and Chambers? Is there a motion to approve the new production, resolution number R2110? The chair will make the motion to approve. Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Motion second by Adam. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion by roll call vote?
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Ricci?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Bound by the court, my vote is yes.
Director Urosic?
Yes.
And Director Paris?
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. We're now on item E, transfer applications. Consideration and possible action on resolution number R2111, approving transfer of stored imported water, permit production rights, and carryover water. Kate?
Yep. So there are 2 transfers, and the first one starts on page 93 of the packet. And the Sieberts would like to transfer 4 acre-feet of permanent production rights and 104 acre-feet of carryover water to Michael Herbert. And the Siebert's parcel is in the West Antelope subarea, and Herbert's parcel is in the Central Antelope subarea, and that is shown on a figure on page 95 of the packet. Mr. Herbert has a production right of 1 acre-feet per year, so he's an Exhibit 4 party because he received a transfer previously. I can't quite remember who actually transferred that permanent production right to him. Might have been the Sieberts. And he also received a transfer of carryover water from the Sieberts in 2020 of 315 acre-feet per year. And in 2020, he pumped 35 acre-feet. And so he has about 281 acre-feet of carryover water, plus what this transfer, if this transfer is approved, of water on the books for him. And Herbert's well in the past has pumped 400 acre-feet per year when that parcel was owned by the Derrick family. And they were listed in the judgment as small pumpers, but they produced more than 3 acre-feet per year between 2016 and 2018. And they worked with a Watermaster, general counsel, and engineer to come to an agreement that they owed replacement water obligations of about 400 acre-feet per year for 2018. So they likely pumped that amount, if not more. And the Herbert well is located on the eastern side of the Central Antelope Valley subarea. And that is on the edge of a large cone of depression, and that's centered about 12 miles to the southwest. Hydrographs from nearby wells are shown on a figure on page 96 of the packet. And the 2 hydrographs that are closest to the Herbert well are on the center right side of the figure. And well 2001, the hydrograph indicates a slight long-term decline in water levels of about 5 feet since about 1999. And the hydrograph of well 2901 indicates a larger decline of about 20 feet over the last 20 years. That has more variation in levels, probably in response to wet years and local pumping. And so there's no material injury associated with groundwater storage and sustainable yield, since the production is moving from one location to another in the basin. And the 104 acre feet of this transfer is a one-time transfer, and 4 acre feet will be a permanent transfer of production rights. And there's no expected impact to local water quality or recharge associated with this production. And Mr. Herbert's well is located in an area of past inelastic land subsidence, and if chronic lowering of water levels were expected as a result of this production, additional land subsidence could be triggered. However, the large volumes of water have been pumped from this well in the past. Most of this transfer is associated with that one-time transfer, so impacts to land subsidence, such that the land use would be affected are not anticipated either. So for these reasons, Todd Groundwater does not anticipate a material injury associated with this transfer, and we recommend approval of it. Are there any questions?
What did I come over here for? Oh.
Any questions? Or hearing none, go on to the next, please.
Okay. And the last transfer is a transfer of stored imported water from the Willow Springs Water Bank to AVEC's West Side Water Bank. And that application starts on page 106 of the packet. WDSCA2 would like to transfer 1,087.13 acre feet of water from one bank to another. And this is the remaining amount of water that they have in the Willow Springs Water Bank. After 2 previous transfers, one was a little over 11,000 and the other was a little over 2,000. And AVEC would account for this water in its West Side Water Bank if this transfer is approved. And Figure 1 on page 107 of the packet shows the locations of the banks in the West Antelope subarea. And given the proximity of the 2 banking projects and the mounding and radial flow that has occurred during recharge over time, the stored water in the 2 banks have likely commingled and are both flowing down gradient toward the central Antelope Valley subarea. So this transfer is shifting the recovery location of stored water a few miles to the southeast and allows for potential increased pumping in an area of relatively high water levels in the West Antelope Valley subarea. And for these reasons, we find the potential for material injury as defined in the judgment to be negligible, and we also recommend approval of this transfer. The advisory committee had some comments regarding this application, and one of the comments was, were cumulative impacts considered in this transfer? And this transfer involved banking recovery that's relocated from one area to a nearby area. Because the timing and volumes associated with the recovery are not currently known, it's difficult to develop any type of impact analysis, especially a cumulative analysis. We're limited in our ability to conduct a technically credible cumulative analysis without a groundwater model or some other numerical tool that can analyze multiple effects at one time. But in this case, banking recovery would have been allowed under the judgment at one bank, and simply moving the recovery a short distance to another bank does not appear to warrant concern. We also want to mention that we want as much banking flexibility as the basin can allow to provide a critical and reliable water supply during droughts. And as we complete ramp down and record how the basin is responding, recovery and banking operations may require additional analyses in the future, but we don't want to limit the ability to store water and recover it. And let's see what we had.
advisory committee also questioned how the accounting for the West Side Water Bank will be modified to show this transfer. And the amount will be subtracted from the West Side Water Bank accounting tables that I have in the annual report, and it will be added to the amount in storage. It'll be subtracted from the Willow Springs Water Bank and added to the amount in storage at the West Side Water Bank in my accounting tables. So are there any questions, and did I answer the advisory committee questions sufficiently?
This is Adam. I have a comment.
Okay.
I appreciate you bringing this issue of a comprehensive, cumulative analysis, and I really would like for the board and the staff to take that to heart, because the theme, I keep hearing the same thing from various people who understand groundwater. And I think it's, at least I feel it's my responsibility to point that out to the board and to the staff to revisit this issue and consider this thorough, comprehensive, detailed analysis using groundwater models.
Any other discussion? Hearing no further discussion, is there a motion to approve resolution number R2111, approving transfer of stored imported water, permanent production rights, and carryover water for Siebert to Herbert and WDCA2?
One quick for the 315 acre feet. Do we know over what period that amount would be pumped? I know some of it is a lease, and 4 acre feet is a permanent sale, I would assume. But does the application says this water is going to be used over 3, 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, or we don't know?
We don't know.
Okay.
It wasn't really specified of when recovery would occur.
Okay. Any further discussion? Is there a motion to approve resolution number R2111?
Landry, so moved.
Second, Kathy McLaren.
Second by Kathy. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion by roll call vote.
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Ricci?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urasic?
Yes.
And Director Paris?
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. We're now on item. How did we go from E to G?
This is Andrew Warner. I'm wondering if I just might make a comment on Adam's question or his comment.
Go ahead.
Yes,
Andrew.
sure. I just wanted to offer Adam, having worked on water banking programs in the Central Valley for quite a long time, almost 20 years now, the modeling can be very tricky to do an overarching model, all-encompassing. And what I see that has worked very well is that each of the individual water banks have their own monitoring and mitigation program that goes through, a process, and then each of those banks are monitoring impacts to surrounding pumpers and wells and banking programs. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate perfectly to an adjudicated basin, but I'm offering it as a potential interim step. I know the Willow Springs Water Bank, as an example, already has that mitigation program in place. I'm sure AVEC does the same. So there is a way, without getting burdened by models, which can take a lot of work and be very time consuming, to take interim steps to monitor what's going on as these water banks, for example, operate by using these monitoring programs rather than the overall encompassing model. Because I agree, you want to have that data. So I'm sharing it with you just so you know that there are different paths to that kind of solution.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. And we do monitor the static water level now, and we have a program of such. I just think, we need to get to a point where that data is adding value to the decision-making process that the board is taking on a regular basis.
I hear you.
Thank you for that info, Tom.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you, Director Paris.
Thank you for the comments. And I believe now we're on item G. Memorandum update to rules and regulations.
Yes, another memo.
Craig.
Yes, another memo suggesting a revision to the rules and regs as to transfers and adding a sentence on page 116 of your board packet that a party may not transfer water rights that are not owned by that party pursuant to the terms of the judgment. Let me give you some background. You'll remember back at the December board meeting, the board directed council to generate some revised rules and regs to try and make it clear that any transfer request had to be submitted by the party that owned the water rights being transferred and not be submitted by a lessee or an assignee or a sublessee under some other private contractual agreement. And we had a situation where a party was not the owner of the right, at least record title owner of the right, and they wanted to be involved in a transfer of production rights. And even though the board did ultimately approve the transfers, subject to some conditions, the resolution was very clear that we weren't allowing this as precedent, that we didn't have rules and regulations in place that would require that the actual transferor of the rights be the owner of the rights. The problem when they're not the owner is that it involves the general counsel and staff in reviewing what authority the transferor has to transfer the rights. We have to review side agreements, ancillary agreements, contracts that show that indeed the transferor has the right to engage in the transfer. And it created a lot of extra cost and time and effort that the board didn't want to have repeated. And so we're suggesting on pages 115 and 116 of your packet that we amend section 13F to add the bold language, one sentence at the top of page 116 that reads, a party may not transfer water rights not owned by that party pursuant to the terms of the judgment, regardless of whether the party may be entitled to use such water rights pursuant to a lease agreement or other private contract. So that would simplify the transfer process and reduce the exposure of the Watermaster board for allowing a transfer where the transferor may not have authority to transfer the rights. And we're relying instead on our interpretation of third-party agreements. So the suggestion is to add that sentence to Rules and Regs section 13F small I and to add a condition to the transfer request form that reads as follows. It's in your board packet at 116. The seller transferor must be the owner of the water rights pursuant to the judgment. No party may transfer water rights held pursuant to a lease agreement or other private contract with the actual rights owner. And it's our suggestion that, like the previous amendment to the rules and regs, subject to comment and revision from public comment and the board's comment, that you authorize general counsel to propose these revisions posted for public notice and a public hearing at the next board meeting. I'll just finally say the advisory committee looked at the memo and had no comments for it. So with that, I'm certainly open to any questions, but I wanted the board to remember what the genesis was of this, that we're not just willy-nilly revising rules and regulations, but there was a good reason to do so. And open to any questions or ideas, suggestions on the language proposed.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I seem to forget the details of the case that prompted the need for what you just described, Craig, which I completely on board with. Do you recall the individual that applied and we approved?
It was CFI, which was transferring some production rights that were actually owned by County Sanitation District number 14.
And who did CFI transfer the water to?
5 Lions.
No, it was 5 Lions.
5 Lions, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Now, does your amendment proposal also preclude someone from requesting water to pump water and then selling it to someone else to use? In other words, retailing it?
I don't know that it would directly impact that, Director Riki. It's looking for the transfer statute alone or regulation alone.
So, in your legal opinion, when someone does that, comes to the board, applies for water, to pump water, and sell it, how should we include that or address that, or do we even need to address that?
I think we take it a step at a time and start with the issue of the transferor being the owner of the water right, and then review that issue for another session. I'm not prepared to say that it needs to go into this discussion of amending Rule 13F. I just have to look at that.
Fair enough.
Craig, this is Derek. I guess just a question is, and I appreciate what we're trying to accomplish here is, I like the ability of free flow of business, and I think even as some of the landowners spoke up today of being able to sell their carryover and move water as a landowner, versus a tenant. I understand the difference. I guess my question is, in your research in deriving this recommendation, did you look at any other adjudicated basins within California that how they've dealt with this, or if they dealt with it in the past that's not that goes a different path than what you're recommending?
Not directly. I've got experience in a couple of others that I use as background, but I did not. This was more directly a result of an actual situation that arose on a couple of occasions and required an extraordinary amount of resources to resolve that we wanted to avoid in the future.
So then I'll ask, do you think there's any, I guess my question would be, is there any negative legal impact that would cause a leasee that thought they had those rights now that we've impeded upon those, or are they just going to need to work with the landowner in that process?
I think the latter. They're going to need to work with the landowner in a transfer application, because as you can imagine, otherwise that involves the staff and council in analyzing lease agreements, sublease agreements, conveyance transfer agreements to see whether there is actual authority vested in the transferor to transfer the water rights.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I understand completely what you're saying, though, Director Urisic, that it can impact the free flow of right on a transfer market. But it is just became an unwieldy problem for us it was like unpeeling an onion. The deeper we went, the more agreements we were reviewing, the more uncomfortable we came. Even though we got an indemnity, I prefer not to have to rely on an indemnity in a transfer form.
No, I do recall that and appreciate those comments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Rob. So in the future, if this is approved, how would that transaction take place?
Well, the actual water right holder would be the transferor. In the actual owner of the right would need to be the transferor.
And then how would the lessor of the right, they would be part of that transaction if they're getting a payment for what they have leased?
Yeah, right?
Foresee it?
I guess they'd be a part of the agreement in that sense, but what this is focused on is the fact that the owner of the right, the owner is the transferor for purposes of transfer provisions under the rules and regs.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, I would imagine, Craig, you want a motion just like you did the other one?
Yes, to direct staff to post this for 30-day public comment and move forward with it at the next board meeting.
And that's the amendment of section 13F.
Correct.
Double I. Okay. Is there a motion to have staff post and go through the procedures to get this amendment on 13F done?
I move that we do.
Motion made by Adam. Is there a second?
Second by Kathy.
Second by Kathy. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion by roll call vote.
Director McLaren?
Yes.
Director Ariki?
Yes.
Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urosik?
Just to clarify, we're going to have one more chance at this after public comment, right?
Yes.
Okay, then I say yes.
Director Paris?
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. We're now on to item 9, Administrator's Report, Replacement Water Assessment Invoice Status.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you. This is Matt. In your packet on page 119 is a spreadsheet that shows the status of all replacement water assessments that have been invoiced. Just to note that this list does not include some of the more recent new production applications that have been approved that are subject to RWAs because we first need the production reports before we can generate the invoices. So this list is just what's been invoiced and received to date. Next item is the 2020 audit. Admin staff signed the engagement letter with FEDAC and Brown, who, as you know, performed the audit last year after we went out with an RFP for a 3-year audit due to the local firm that was doing the audits for the agency no longer performs audits. So again, we've engaged with FEDAC and Brown and have started that process. And we're going to work closely with the administrative committee with directors Urosik and Ariki as we move through the audit process. We did receive a request for a transfer from a party or a producer, and their information is on the transfer bulletin, which is on the website. So if anybody out there is looking to sell some water, I suggest you look at the transfer bulletin, and their information is on there to contact them. And then the last thing I have is was brought up by Director Calandri earlier. Also, it was in the advisory committee report about a potential illegal pumping or exporting of water outside the basin on the far east end of the valley. My recommendation is that we work with Chair Paris and form a small ad hoc committee with 2 directors and staff and maybe some individuals within the advisory committee, because I think that issue, what's going on the far east end of the valley, is kind of bigger than just the Watermaster. I think we need to include other agencies with that discussion.
Yes, I agree with that, and I'm would like to form a committee. I believe, Adam, you might be the best one to be on the committee from the public water providers because of your access to county resources. And I think I would like to be a member of that committee to, I think I can help with resolution of the problem. I think we're going to need law enforcement, the city's involvement, and I will work with Matt to get a meeting together in the near future with our general counsel where we can start working on that issue. And basically it's an issue of a lot of potential illegal pumping on the east side of our valley that has been brought to our attention by some of the landowners. If the board would give consensus for me to form that committee.
I think that sounds like a good committee.
Thank you. And
you said we're going outside the board. Maybe we could ask Galen Kyle to if I hate to put him on the spot again, but he'd be willing to help. He's pretty knowledgeable about that side of the valley.
Yeah, no, actually that's a good suggestion, and I can't obviously force Galen to be on that, but I certainly will invite him to any of our committee meetings to represent the public on that committee.
Right. And I would volunteer my services along with you if you so wish, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, the only problem is we can't have more than 2 members on one committee.
Very good. All right.
Yeah.
No problem.
So I appreciate that, John. And Adam, are you good with being a member?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I don't know if it'd be good for the public, Mr. Galen, to participate in this committee because, as has been indicated, he's very knowledgeable about this these issues.
Yeah, I agree. Galen, are you okay with being the public member on the master committee for this purpose?
I'm fine with it.
Great, thank you. And we'll try to get a meeting together in the next 2 weeks and bring in the stakeholders that we think we need at the committee level. So, Derek, our consensus, you okay with us going forward with this?
I am.
Okay, so I believe I got John, Adam, Kathy, myself, everybody. So we have a consensus. We will form the committee.
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank
Matt.
you. That's all I had.
And then, Patty, you have who we're putting on this committee at this point, and we can reflect that in the minutes. Perfect. We'll just call it an ad hoc meeting for, at this time. And now we're on the Watermaster Engineers Report. Kate, Phyllis?
This is Kate. I'll take this one since I did some of these tables.
Thank you.
And so on page 123 of the packet is a series of tables that summarizes new production and qualified small pumpers that have been approved since 2016. And the tables on the left-hand side show new production by year, and that's the top table. And the table below that shows approved new production by area. Just kind of gives you an indication of the divisions, and you can see that by year, more new production has been approved in 2020 and 2021 than previous years. And by area, more production has been approved in the central and west Antelope Valley subareas. And there's a second column there because I'm subtracting the 215 acre feet per year of new production that was approved only for use in 2020 and 2021. So you can see that the total of, I guess I can call it permanent new production is 352 acre feet per year. And the tables on the right show approved qualified small pumpers by year, which is the table on the top, and by sub-area, which is the table on the bottom. And the total of qualified small pumpers that have been approved since 2016. We actually didn't start approving them until 2018. That's why there's no 16 or 17 in the table. That amounts to about 249 acre feet per year. And that's based on the assumption that 83 small pumpers that have been approved will pump 3 acre feet per year. Do you have any questions on these tables? I also want to point out.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Good. It's a good way to keep track of it. And we'll update these every month.
Yeah, I like this.
And I also want to point out that admin staff has been collecting well completion reports for all new production wells that have been approved. And they're getting information from the state's website, which is still kind of in the process of posting all the well applications or all the well completion reports. And they've also been requesting that drillers provide the Watermaster with these well completion reports after the wells have been drilled. And so that process is ongoing.
That's really, really good. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome. Oh, and Angel did this great map on page 124 of the packet, which shows locations of all the new production and qualified small pumpers by the little pin marks. And that's very interesting as well.
Great.
And the last thing that I have is every year, to comply with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, Antelope Valley is to submit its annual report to the DWR website. And kind of the set deadline for these is April 1st. But since our annual report's not done till August 1st, we just submit a letter saying such. And we have done that. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, we're now on our general counsel's report. Craig?
Yes, a couple of things. The board authorized council to seek approval of an amendment to the rules and regulations last month, allowing the recovery of ordinary legal fees incurred with respect to transfer applications, storage applications, new production applications. And that hearing was this morning, was summarily done by Judge Komar and approved by him. There was no opposition. It's just an item of information that we got that done. So that amendment to 19J of the rules and regulations is now approved by the court. Second, just a matter of update, the Willis class appeal decision came down on March 16th. The Court of Appeal affirmed the trial court's judgment as to the Willis class in all regards, rejected all of their arguments pretty summarily, though it's a lengthy opinion. If the board wants more comment about the appellate decision, we can do that. But the upshot of it is that the Willis class's argument that they had their rights as correlative right holders subordinated inappropriately by the court was rejected. So the judgment as to the Willis class issues seems to be preserved for the time being. There's still a further appellate review that could occur if the California Supreme Court wanted to act on the matter. The case, one interesting note was the case was unpublished, is an unpublished opinion, which means it's binding between the parties that were before it, but discourages it being cited as precedent in other cases. I don't know if there's anyone on the